Hi guys, and welcome to this video on how to use mid-side EQ to make your mix or master sound better. Some pro tips for your tracks. So my name's Nicholas Dombrain and you're tuned into Zeitgeist Mastering's channel. I'm working as a mastering engineer, and mid-side EQ is very important in how we shape and adjust our mixes when we consider the stereo image. And it's a fantastic tool to help us do this. And I'm going to cover some more general points on how to approach it, and some perhaps really good tips for you if you're not quite sure how to approach mid-side EQ and what it can do for you in your mix. So I'm going to go through, we've got our project set up with some different samples where we'll cover some different techniques and tips here. The first sample you heard playing at the start there is Christian Bachmann and the track called Edelbier. I'll put the in the description I'll put links to all of the tracks playing, and if you want to find out anything more, there'll be stuff in the description. But basically we've got our project set up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 samples. We've got a spectrum analyzer here and a correlation meter, because when working with the mid and the side signals, it's nice to have correlation to see what's happening, to see that we're not getting any nasty phasing issues. For example, when that correlation meter comes over to this side, or over here, it's a little bit dangerous and we are probably getting some phasing. You can usually hear it with your ears anyway, but it's nice to have the meters there to back us up. And this is a cool little free plugin from Brainworks called the BX Solo, and it simply allows us to solo the mid and the side signals separately. Okay, now for the purpose of this video, I'm predominantly going to be using a hardware EQ that I personally love. It's called the HTE 250A High Definition Equalizer from Customaudiogermany, and I also offer a review video on this particular EQ, so if you want to know more about the actual hardware, check out the review video. The reason I'm using hardware for most of this is because I'm used to it. I use it in the mastering quite often, or almost all the time, and I find it much more forgiving and much more intuitive when I'm adjusting the controls. When you're looking at a plugin or something, it's not the same as feeling what's happening. So that's why I'm going to use that for most of these examples. We will use a plugin at the end, which we'll show you in a minute. Let's get right into it. So the first tip now I'm going to show you is how to achieve a more open and high dimension in the high-end sound. So basically top end dimension, natural openness, top end dimension. So let's have a listen to this track again. I'm just going to loop the main section here. We're routing out through our hardware already with our reference grade converters, and if you listen carefully, for me the high is just not as defined as it should be. It's a little bit muffled. If you listen to those cymbals, they're a bit hidden and a bit sort of stuck in the background. So if we jump onto our side signal here on the hardware, and I'll turn it on the high section, we put on a high shelf. Okay, so we've selected a high shelf, and what I'm going to do is just increase some of the level on this high section and maybe tune it a bit to find where it best suits this particular music, and to try and get that cymbal a little bit out there, a bit more dimension. So let's turn that on. Bypassed. So there we go. With it bypassed, you can really tell the difference. Hopefully you can tell in the video, even though it's lower quality, but you're really getting some dimension. All we've done is boosted at a high shelf at around 15 kilohertz. Now again, with the hardware, we can get away with more than we can with plugins. Probably, I quite like a fair bit, around about 8 decibels boost there. And we can also come onto the mid channel, and depending on how severe the hi-hats or whatever are in your track or the high section, you may or may not want to decrease a bit to combat what we're adding in the highs, or in this case, turning it on. Bypass the whole EQ, let's crack on. There's the high end bypassed. So in this case, I've decided I like a little bit of addition on both the mid signal. Now the mid is of course the left and right together, what exists in both speakers together, and the side signal is everything that's different. So now if this track had a strong and present high end already, I probably wouldn't add it in the mid. I'd rather take a little bit away. But the main thing is adding a nice shelf here with the high section may do wonders. Take it easy, experiment with it. That's tip number 1. The next tip we're going to look at, number 2, is broadening the low mid soundstage, or the giant low mids trick or technique if you like. So this one might apply better to rock tracks where there's that nice solid low mid element and really where the grounding of the track is often. So we'll go ahead, have a quick listen here. Lo tonto que fui junto a ti cuando te abrazabas a mí. No te vayas por favor, que si te vas dejas que muera. Okay, so with this trick, what we do, or what we can do, is apply some boosting in the side signal to the low mids, and to see how that will broaden the body of this track. And in a sense, it's sort of a 3D effect, and another way that mid-side can be really cool to add something to your track. Now, often a good idea is just to solo the side signal so we can hear what's in it already. Let's do that quickly. It's fine, there's nothing too low, and it's sounding okay. So let's jump onto our hardware and have a listen to what we can do. We're going to work with the low mid band, and I'm going to tune that first. So I'm going to start with a high Q setting and try and find what area is the low mid sort of most sweet in this track. Okay, so there's a nice sweet body spot around 200 hertz or so. Now, it's going to exist generally in the range between 120 and maybe 300 hertz. You don't want to boost too low, we'll go into that later, but okay, let's have a listen again. Bypass. It's a really great way if you focus on those guitars. I've gone quite extreme because it's hard to hear, especially when you're not used to it. But those guitars get a little bit more spread, and it gives the track a little bit of dimension as well. And so I like using this technique when it's needed. It's a way of increasing that area of the track without coming up with muddy issues. If we were to do this with a general EQ and to boost that area, it'd sound really muddy. And by doing it just in the side signal, we can avoid those, you know, issues with muddy sounds and things like that. So that's another tip. Let's just have a listen one more time. Off. And on. If I go ahead like I just did and reduce that area, it sounds really thin and lacking that sort of body. So have a go with that one. I like to think of it then as the gain as being sort of a control of how much you like that low end body. So it's a taste control, if you like. So that's tip number 2. And tip number 3 is focused vocals. So we've got a track here with vocals, and let's have a quick listen.
If things ain't working out, don't go numb. Try to be different. If things ain't working out, don't go numb.
Yeah, it's a great track by Dub Stylex called Phases, out on Machine Soul Records. And there's not a big problem with it, but I feel that the vocals are just a little bit distant in a way from the rest of the music and need to be pulled in together a little bit with it. And so what we can do is we can target the vocal with our side EQ and just pull them in a little bit, and it brings more focus. And this is a bit of a trick or a technique that you might use when all other options have failed. So in the mastering sense, maybe if you can fix it in the mix, then you would. But so let's have a look. First of all, I'm going to try and find the vocals in the side signal, and maybe I should solo them to hear that. So immediately when I solo, you can hear there's a very clear vocal in the side signal, so proving that what we're hearing is quite correct. Okay, I'm going to boost first to find it.
If things ain't working out, don't go numb. Try to it different. If things ain't working out.
There it is there. I've found the frequency with a high Q setting. It's about 780 Hertz or so, where it's the sweet spot for the vocal. And if we go ahead then and reduce the Q setting so it's a little bit milder, and have a listen as I take off the solo here. Bypass. So just by reducing that sweet spot frequency of that vocal in the side signal, we've sort of brought it a little bit more to the center. Now often vocals are panned wide. It's a common mixing technique, this sort of thing. So that's what we can do to bring it back down to earth a little bit. And what we can also do is go to the same area on the mid signal. And maybe combine a little bit of a boost so that we're not losing level. A little bit of a boost on the mid signal combined with the reduction on the side to bring those vocals in. Now, of course, if your vocal wasn't out to the side, you might boost this vocal area in the side to gain a little bit more dimension, and that can be another tip if you like. So this one's about vocal tuning. Let's have one more listen. Try to be different if things ain't working out. Don't go numb. Try to be different if things ain't working out. Bypassing. Don't go numb. Try to be different if things ain't working out. So for me, it just brings those vocals into the right dimension, and you can decide for yourself the amounts and how it works. That's the tip. The next tip we'll move right along, and this tip is called mono bass, and last but not least, absolutely not, this is probably the most common thing people do with a mid-side EQ, and it's been used for as long as music's been recorded, I'd say, almost anyway. Basically, when we hear low frequencies in the side signal, it's a very unnatural sound because you have large sound waves, and when it comes from left and right individually, it doesn't really sound focused at all. It's very washy. And music that has a bass side signal often has phasing issues, which can be nasty sounding effect. And there's also some practical reasons as well. When the vinyl lathes used to cut vinyl, if there was low rumbling frequencies in a stereo field, the stylus could actually jump and skip and cause issues. So often on the whole track, you would mono the bass frequencies. So let's have a listen here. Now this is more for your production work, for your mixes. This is a sample that I found in a sample pack, and I was quite surprised to hear it because I thought, wow, that sounds very uncentered and a bit odd. And we can fix that with the mid-side EQ. So, sounding a bit odd. If we looked at our correlation meter there, it was coming right over to this dangerous area. We want it more over here. Now, if I solo the side signal with our little plug-in here, we can immediately see on the visualizer there's a lot of low energy in this sound. Now, for this one, for the sake of showing what I'm doing, I'm going to use this fantastic plugin from Brainworks, the Brainworks digital equalizer, the digital V2. Now, it's just like the hardware. You've got to consider your mono section and your stereo section, or your mid section and your side section. Now, what we can do is solo here as well. And what we're going to do, here's the high pass filter for the side section. We're going to filter out that. A very simple but necessary technique. I'll take it off solo. Bypass. So if you had a lot of synths in your mix with that sort of thing going on, it would really sound terrible. So this technique will save you. Now, we could combine that with some of the other things we've learnt, like a little bit of a boost in the highs, a little bit of a shelf there, and that might also help this sound. And with this plugin, we can also use the mono maker, which is effectively just high passing as well on that side signal. Okay, so you've got that option as well. But very basic technique. We've monoed out those low frequencies. So everything here is now only occurring in the mono signal, which is what we want. Our brain likes to hear those low frequencies coming from the center. And the other point to mention is that all clubs have a mostly, or not all, I shouldn't say all, but most clubs have a mono sound system, and at least the subs will be in mono. So if you have stereo bass going to the subs, it's going to get a bit messy. So always good to mono those low frequencies. And I'm going to reset this now. We'll give you one more listen. Bypassed. Back on. And if we have a look at our correlation, much healthier. Now this sound I'm not particularly impressed with. I would clean it up more, but I'm just showing you this tip. If you love learning about audio tips and tricks, techniques, I do offer very in-depth courses both on EQ and mastering, and they're available at audiomasteringcourses.com. Put the link up there. If you want to get more into things, I do cover all these sorts of things. And we'll just reset this now and have a look at one more thing, which is a whole track. Okay, so cool, it's pretty well produced, but the problem for me is that bass is somehow out there and again distant from the track, and it doesn't feel as tight and as clean as it should. I want to hear that bass coming out powerful, driven in the center, and that's something I'd definitely pick up on if I was mastering your track, because you know, it's just something you know when you've done it 100 times or 1,000 times. So let's have a listen to what happens when we mono that bass. We'll just put the main section on. Bypass. And we can try the mono maker as well. Perhaps not so severe. There we go. So that's a very important tip, guys. You can do that with your tracks if they're sounding a bit washy. Of course, if it's produced perfectly, you won't have to do that. But, you know, it's just, as I said, we want to point out how this mid-side EQ can be really beneficial to what you're doing. And I might, of course, go ahead and do some other things here with this track and, you know, some high boosting and some tuning. Now with these tips, you should be able to do it. And, yeah, that wraps it up. Thanks for watching. Do follow us on Facebook if you can. That's great. Keep up to date with things. And, yeah, post your comments. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Hope you've enjoyed.